Sometimes the most important shifts arrive without noise. No warning bells, no dramatic endings. Just a subtle sense that something inside you has gone still, not in peace, but in readiness. If you have felt this quiet and wondered why your life feels strangely distant from you, this is not the moment of loss. This is the moment before your reality begins to rearrange itself. There is a phase where everything continues to function, yet nothing grips you the way it used to. You move through your days, you fulfill your roles, you meet your obligations. But the emotional weight that once pulled you forward has thinned. It feels as if you are present, yet no longer fully rooted in what you are maintaining. This is often mistaken for boredom, exhaustion, or a fading of passion. But what is actually happening is more precise than that. Your inner system is loosening its attachment to the version of life you have been reinforcing. Not through resistance, but through a quiet withdrawal of identification. When attachment fades, urgency dissolves. Goals that once felt necessary begin to feel optional. Old problems lose their ability to dominate your inner space. You are still capable of action, but the pressure that once shaped your identity no longer defines you. On a deeper level, the nervous system is stepping out of familiar emotional patterns. The body is no longer rehearsing the same reactions to the same circumstances. And when your inner responses change, the structure of your outer reality can no longer remain fixed. The field responds to who you are being, not to what you are trying to preserve. This is why this phase can feel confusing. Nothing is broken enough to justify the inner distance you feel. There is no obvious crisis to point at, no visible collapse to explain the shift. From the outside, your life may look intact, even successful, yet something in you knows it no longer fits. The mind struggles here because it craves certainty. It wants a clear reason, a label, a direction to follow. When none appears, it tries to restore familiarity by reviving old fears, old urgency, old narratives of responsibility. It whispers that your detachment is recklessness, that your neutrality is failure, that your quiet is something to fix. But this detachment is not confusion. It is the soft release of an identity that no longer needs this version of reality to feel secure. You are no longer fully invested in maintaining a life that has completed its purpose for you. And when identity loosens, reality must reorganize, because it can only mirror the self you inhabit. There is a brief space where the old structure is no longer fully supported, and the new one has not yet formed. This in-between state is not a mistake. It is a recalibration. The absence of signs, the lack of reassurance, the silence you may feel around you are not abandonment. They are space being created for something different to take shape. Many people interrupt this moment without realizing it. They rush to fill the stillness with familiar goals. They recreate pressure to feel productive again. They return to old ambitions, not because they are true, but because they are known. If you have noticed the quiet and allowed it to remain, that matters more than you think. This window does not stay open long, not because time is scarce, but because the self resists remaining unanchored. The system either completes its reorientation or rebuilds the old structure with greater force. This is not the moment to force movement. It is the moment to remain present without demanding clarity, because the most decisive shift happens before anything changes on the surface. As this phase deepens, the sense of completion becomes more intimate. It is not just your attachment to circumstances that softens. The version of you that made sense inside this reality begins to feel finished. Not flawed, not broken, simply complete. You may notice that old triggers no longer catch you as quickly. Old frustrations lose their grip before they can take root. Even moments of success feel quieter, less charged with urgency. This can feel unsettling because we were taught to measure growth through emotional intensity, not through inner spaciousness. When emotional peaks soften, the mind assumes something has gone wrong. It scans for loss, for lack, for a missing drive. But nothing is missing. Something is concluding its cycle. What once needed intensity to stay alive no longer requires your nervous system to feed it. On a biological level, the brain is stepping away from the reward and threat patterns that shaped your old momentum. Your system is no longer rehearsing the same inner responses that once gave your world its structure. As those patterns loosen, the emotional charge that sustained your previous direction begins to fade. And as the charge fades, the version of self that depended on it quietly steps back. Identity is not a story you tell yourself. It is the posture your body has learned to hold in the world. When that posture relaxes, you no longer feel compelled to protect who you used to be. You stop needing to defend your choices, justify your pace, or explain your path to others. This inner shift often creates a strange sense of distance. You can remain in the same spaces, among the same people, within the same routines, and yet feel as though you are observing a life you once inhabited rather than living inside it. Not because the world has changed, but because the one who belonged to it is no longer organizing your experience. True shifts do not begin when you acquire something new. They begin when something old releases its authority over you. When the internal coherence of your previous identity weakens, the field pauses, not to resist you, but to wait for alignment to settle. Movement without inner stabilization only recreates familiar patterns in unfamiliar places. This pause can feel uncomfortable because it removes both certainty and pressure at once. You are no longer driven by the old storyline, yet the new one has not revealed its shape. You exist in a space without narrative, and the mind is uneasy in places without roles to play. So it looks for problems to manage, for flaws to correct, for plans to optimize. Here, neutrality becomes a form of intelligence. Neutrality is not inaction. It is the choice to not interfere with a process that is still completing itself. You do not need a new identity yet. You do not need a vision to chase. You do not need to name what is forming. There is value in allowing the old orientation to finish dissolving before asking the next direction to appear. When transitions are rushed, the outer circumstances change faster than the inner reference point. That is how people alter everything around them and still feel unchanged within. From a quantum lens, this is the thinning of the old probability structure. The pattern that once held your reality in place is losing dominance. It has not collapsed, but it is no longer being reinforced with the same consistency. When the internal weighting shifts, external reorganization becomes unavoidable. This is why many people sense that something is approaching without being able to name it. The feeling of standing at the edge of movement is accurate. Clarity is not required for the shift to complete. In fact, the urge to define what comes next often delays the transition itself. As this phase deepens, the outer world may feel strangely quiet. Fewer signals, fewer confirmations, less feedback to interpret. What once felt responsive now feels neutral, even distant. But this quiet is not absence, it is compression. Before a shift stabilizes, the field reduces noise. Information that once appeared through external signs begins consolidating inwardly. The system withdraws stimulation so that reorganization can complete without interference. Precision emerges when the environment becomes still enough to allow one direction to settle. The mind struggles with this because it equates silence with abandonment. It wants evidence. It wants reassurance. It wants something to react to. Yet what feels like emptiness is actually a narrowing of possibility. When signals quiet, probability gathers its focus. The nervous system often mistakes what is familiar for what is safe. So when stillness lingers, when neutrality extends beyond what feels comfortable, a quiet reflex appears. It suggests returning to what once made sense, even if it no longer feels true. In the moment that reflex is followed, inner coherence begins to split. The shift does not collapse through failure. It dissolves through retreat. At this point, probability moves in one of two directions. Either the emerging identity gains enough stability to lead your reality forward, or the former identity gathers enough weight to reorganize your experience around the past. Nothing in the outer world announces this turning point. There is no visible signal, no dramatic marker, no event to point to. The decision happens internally beneath conscious awareness, yet it is definitive. What changes is not your environment, but the direction your inner system commits to. Remaining here does not require belief. It requires emotional non-regression. You are not asked to generate optimism, only to refrain from reactivating urgency, fear, or the impulse to repair the silence. Steadiness, not certainty, is what allows recalibration to complete. When you hold steady without demanding evidence, the field interprets that posture as readiness. Not readiness for reward, but readiness for responsibility. Responsibility for inhabiting a wider sense of self. Responsibility for carrying a larger capacity to meet reality without shrinking back into what once defined you. This is the stage where the new orientation begins to settle quietly beneath awareness. Stabilization does not begin with effort. It begins with orientation. Where your attention rests becomes the ground your nervous system learns to stand on. Language can support this anchoring, not as affirmation, but as direction. Not to convince yourself of anything, but to guide your awareness away from retreat. Attention steadies the body, and the body is what the field reads when it responds. This is not a message to the universe. It is a signal of commitment within your own system, a choice to not collapse back into familiarity, a choice to let the transition finish its work without interruption. Once that choice is made, there is very little to force. The process completes through consistency, not intensity. This phase does not linger by design. The system cannot remain in a threshold state for long. Inner coherence always seeks resolution. Identity either organizes forward or contracts backward. This is why many people later describe their most meaningful shifts as something they nearly overlooked. Not because nothing was occurring, but because what was unfolding did not demand attention. When the internal structure has released its hold on the former timeline, yet the new orientation has not fully crystallized, you exist within a narrow window of transition. It is quiet, it is subtle, and it carries more influence over your future than any visible event ever could. This threshold is light and almost weightless, not chaotic, but fragile in a quiet way. What is fragile here is not you, but the configuration of identity itself. And anything delicate completes only when it is not disturbed. The reason this window is brief is simple. The longer the self remains undefined, the stronger the pull toward resolution becomes. Resolution will arrive in one of two directions. If steadiness is maintained, not enthusiasm, not certainty, just steadiness, the emerging identity gains enough coherence to lead your reality forward. When coherence settles, movement follows naturally. Reality reorganizes because it finally has a stable inner reference to mirror. But if steadiness gives way to relief-seeking, the previous identity returns with surprising speed. This return rarely feels like collapse. It feels like comfort. Relief from not knowing. Relief from silence. Relief from the discomfort of becoming someone you have not yet learned to inhabit. The former timeline may have been constraining, but it was recognizable. It offered familiar tensions, predictable patterns, and an emotional texture the nervous system knew how to manage. This is why people step back without realizing what they stepped away from. Old aims are resumed, old conflicts are reactivated. The quiet phase is dismissed as overthinking, and reality responds immediately because familiarity carries coherence. No punishment follows this choice. The system simply organizes around the identity that feels most stable to inhabit. This is also why timing around major shifts can feel strange. It is not that possibility disappears. It is that the internal opening closes. A transition of this kind is not powered by courage or belief. It is sustained by your capacity to remain grounded in unfamiliar stability. Not every leap forward looks like action. Many are completed through restraint, through non-reaction, through allowing silence to finish what it began. This gentle passage exists to spare you a harsher kind of transformation. There is another way change can occur, through disruption, friction, and breakdown before renewal. This doorway requires none of that. It opens through presence alone. If you recognize the quiet detachment within you, the neutral space where urgency has softened without desire being lost, you are already inside the passage. The question is not whether change is possible. The question is whether you will remain steady long enough for it to settle. When the threshold is crossed, nothing announces it. There are no inner fireworks, no dramatic sense of arrival. What shifts first is not your life, but your relationship with it. The new phase does not feel grand. It feels precise. Stability replaces tension. Groundedness replaces striving. What once felt misaligned quietly finds its place, and life, instead of feeling bigger, begins to feel truer. This is how real transitions complete. They do not arrive as surges of intensity. They arrive as a settling of the inner ground. The mind expects change to feel like elevation, expansion, or emotional fireworks, but growth without regulation feels disorienting. Growth with regulation feels quiet. The nervous system does not celebrate the shift, it integrates it. Once integration begins, reality starts to reorganize with surprising ease. Not because you made a dramatic decision, but because the inner structure that sustained the former identity is no longer being fed. Attention moves on its own. Priorities rearrange without force. Choices feel clear instead of heavy. You stop narrating who you are becoming. You begin responding from that place naturally. This is why change often feels unexplainable after it has occurred. The explanation exists within the body before it appears in the world. When the observer within you becomes coherent, probability resolves. There is no longer an internal split between who you were and who you are inhabiting. The field now has a stable point to mirror. Reality responds not with spectacle, but with alignment. Life no longer feels like something you must chase. It meets you in a quieter way. Circumstances still arise, but they do not demand the same emotional expenditure. They are met with presence, not with struggle. This is the difference between living through effort and living through coherence. Most people try to reshape their lives through willpower, planning, and repetition. Few learn how to remain still long enough for identity to reorganize first. Yet identity is the engine that moves everything else. Once it shifts, the outer world follows without being pushed. The risk now is not regression. The risk is stepping out of embodiment to analyze the shift too quickly. Understanding can pull you back into the mind. Stability is what allows the new phase to take root. You do not need to guard this change with tension. You stabilize it by living simply from it. Presence is what keeps the door open. Integration is what makes the transition real. There is no urgency here. No announcement is required. No explanation is necessary. The movement has already happened. If this message feels familiar to you, if something in you recognizes this tone of quiet arrival, then you did not miss the crossing. You are already on the other side. Remain present. This is the ground you now live from.